You can tell that man behind the mask is Rand Paul. A bunch of protesters descending on the Kentucky senator and his wife Kelly as they left the president's RNC speech from the White House.
And what happened is there was 2 blocks, and I regret that I made this decision, but I said we're going to walk the 2 blocks. We walked 1 block, but as we walked 1 block, we could see some police in the distance, but we also saw a mob of about 30 people marching and yelling. They all of a sudden saw me right as we got to the policeman, fortunately, or I don't think we'd have survived. We got to the policeman, and the policeman I don't think recognized me, and as they came closer, they were shouting my name, and the crowd doubled to 60, and then it doubled again to 120. And as they were surrounding us, and it got closer and closer, and everybody kept pushing back, the policemen were forming a barricade with their bodies. I whispered to the policeman, they know who I am. You've got to get reinforcements. It's going to get worse. He called for reinforcements, but we didn't get any reinforcements. We waited, but the crowd was getting bigger and bigger and pushing in. They were yelling threats. They were trying to push the police over to get to me. They were grabbing at us, and it got worse and worse and worse. And then finally we decided to make a move. I said, we've got to move. If there's not going to be reinforcements, we have to try to get to the hotel, which was another block. And they were shouting threats, to us, to kill us, to hurt us. But they're also shouting, say her name, Breonna Taylor.
Hey, Tim Frisch with A Frisch Perspective here. That was Senator Rand Paul that you saw talking about this situation last night, where after the RNC, he and his wife and some friends were out walking from one place to another in Washington and were being threatened by a mob. I wanted to highlight this story and actually draw attention to an article at Reason.com that I saw. It says, protesters tell Rand Paul, who wrote the Justice for Breonna Taylor Act, to say Breonna Taylor's name. As President Donald Trump concluded his Republican National Convention acceptance speech Thursday night, the largely peaceful demonstrations outside the White House grew more tense and confrontational. Speech attendees leaving the area were heckled, and a crowd of protesters surrounded Senator Rand Paul and his wife Kelly Paul. It's notable that the protesters repeatedly shouted at Paul to say her name. The her in question is Breonna Taylor, a woman who police killed during a no-knock raid on her home in the middle of the night on March 13th. Taylor is an unambiguous victim of police violence and of unnecessary drug war tactics, and protesters are right to demand justice for her. Paul, though, has done much more than just saying Taylor's name. He sponsored the Justice for Breonna Taylor Act, which would prohibit no-knock raids. After talking with Breonna Taylor's family, I've come to the conclusion that it's long past time to get rid of no-knock warrants, said Paul back in June. This bill will effectively end no-knock raids in the United States. It would be wrong to physically intimidate the Pauls in any case, but the crowd also failed to recognize that their alleged foe is one of the most consistent voices for criminal justice reform in the U.S. Senate. To borrow a favorite phrase of the woke activist crowd, educate yourself, street protesters. So that was an interesting article written by Robbie Sove. Rand also has said that he believes mobs like this are actually out-of-state people that are being organized and paid to be there. And so he believes that this is a criminal ring and it needs to be brought down. I think he said by the FBI needs to investigate this. He also said that it was the actions of the police who protected their lives and kept them from danger. And so he was very grateful to the police in this situation. Hearing what happened to Senator Paul reminds me of a couple of things that the Bible talks about. The first is 1 Timothy chapter 2, where Paul says, "First of all, then, I urge that petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for everyone, for kings and all those who are in authority, so that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity." And so this situation reminds us that we do need to pray for our governmental leaders, and we need to pray that God will show his grace so that we can live a quiet and peaceful life. You can see there are a lot of things right now in our culture threatening that. Another thing is in Rand Paul talking about the police coming to his family's defense, I'm reminded of Romans 13, which says, "Let everyone submit to the governing authorities, since there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are instituted by God. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you want to be unafraid of the one in authority?" Do what is good, and you will have its approval. For it is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, because it does not carry the sword for no reason. So clearly, the biblical writer here, Paul, talking about how the government bears the sword, and that is to protect, that is to stamp out danger and evil that would threaten others. And so what we see in this situation is really a reminder to us, again, that we need to be praying, because obviously there are a lot of tumultuous situations right now. So we need to pray for our leaders, as Paul tells us, and also we need to be honoring and respecting leaders and thankful that we have the government, police departments providing protection for us. As Paul says, they don't bear the sword in vain. Today we don't use swords, we use guns, but the same idea. So I just wanted to share this story with you and share some of my thoughts on it. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for listening to what I have to say from A Frisch Perspective.